بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. فلا معنى لتعيين العدد على الصحيح، ومنهم من عينه في الأربعة، وقيل في الخمسة، وقيل في السبعة، وقيل في العشرة، وقيل في الاثني عشرة، وقيل في الأربعين، وقيل في السبعين، وقيل غير ذلك. وتمسك كل قائل بدليل جاء فيه ذكر ذلك العدد فأفاد العلم، وليس بلازم أن يضطرر في غيره لاحتمال الاختصاص. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah said that there has to be a large group of narrators, and practically it should be impossible for this large group to agree upon a lie. He then clarifies that there is no specific number that is required for tawatur, and every narration is to be evaluated separately. He says, فَلَا مَعْنَى لِتَعْيِينِ الْعَدَدِ عَلَى الصَّحِيحِ. There is no significance in specifying the number according to the correct position. That means the minimum number is not specified. Therefore, one narration may have 6 narrators, and from them 9 narrators may transmit, and from them there may be 15 narrators who narrate. Such a narration will be regarded as mutawatir. But in contrast to this, another narration may have 100 narrators, and 110 narrators transmit from them, and 150 narrators transmit from those 110, and yet that narration may not be considered as mutawatir. The objective is that a person must be convinced, irrespective of how many narrators it might be in every link. Allama Munawi rahmallah said, بل بحيث يرتقون إلى حد تحيل العاد معه توافقهم على الكذب وصدوره منهم بلا قصد وإن كان العدد في طبقة كثيرا وفي أخرى قليلا. That there should be so many that generally it is impossible for so many people to agree upon a lie. Likewise, it is generally impossible for them to coincidentally say the same thing, even though the amount of narrators may be a lot in one generation and just a few in another link. Although Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions this view concerning an unspecified number of narrators, he acknowledges that there were some who specified a number of narrators in order for a narration to be regarded as mutawatir. Thus he says, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَيَّنَهُ فِي الْأَرْبَعَةِ. There are some who specified it with 4. After a few lines, he says that each group had proof for their view. For example, it is claimed that the group who specified that there must be 4 narrators in every link look at the fact that for an accusation of zina to be valid, 4 witnesses are required. It is only if there are 4 witnesses the ruling can be issued that the married perpetrator should be killed. So looking at the fact that a person's life can only be taken if there is concrete evidence, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows a person's life to be taken with the testimony of 4 people, therefore 4 will be regarded as a large number. Nonetheless, these 4 still need tazkiyah, therefore it cannot be regarded as a proof. وَقِيلَ فِي الْخَمْسَةِ, and it is said with 5. Other scholars say that there has to be a minimum of 5 narrators in every link, and only then can the narration be regarded as mutawatir. Now here it would have been better for Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah to repeat the words وَمِنْهُمْ, because his presentation gives the impression that it is one person who there is difference of opinion on how many he specified. So the meaning will be according to how he mentions here, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَيَّنَهُ فِي الْأَرْبَعَةِ, that some scholars have specified it with 4. But it is said that these scholars did not specify it with 4, rather these scholars specified it with 5. That is the apparent meaning from the way it is presented here. However, this is not the case. Rather, it means that there are few scholars who specified it with 4, and there are different scholars who specified it with 5. Nonetheless, it is alleged that the proof of this group who say that there must be a minimum of 5 narrators in every link is that when one spouse accuses the other spouse of zina, then the judge will ask that spouse to take 5 oaths. It is only once they have taken 5 oaths that the judge will separate the spouses. This is called li'an. Thus, their argument is that if the sacred bond of marriage can be broken with just 5 oaths, then this proves that the number 5 is a large number. In Al-Yawaqit wa Durar, it is mentioned that this was the view of Alama Baqillani rahimahullah. Wa alayhi al-Baqillani. This is how it comes in volume 1 on page 239. That upon this view is Alama Baqillani rahimahullah. However, from Tadrib al-Rawi, it is apparent that Alama Baqillani rahimahullah merely suggested this, and it was not his opinion. Nevertheless, it is obvious that there is no link between mutawatir and li'an. وَقِيلَ فِي السَّبْعَةِ, and it is said with 7. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what proof this group uses. The commentators mention another reason, but some say that this group base their opinion on the fact that there are 7 heavens and 7 days in a week, etc. But all these are totally unrelated with mutawatir. وَقِيلَ فِي الْعَشَرَةِ, and it is said with 10. Some people attributed this view to Ulama Suyuti rahimahullah. However, Ulama Suyuti rahimahullah very clearly says in Tadrib al-Rawi, وَلَا يُعْتَبَرُ فِيهِ عَدَدٌ مُعَيَّنٌ, that there is no specified amount that is considered regarding tawatur. Ulama Suyuti rahimahullah then says that the specification of 10 is actually the view of Ulama Istakhri rahimahullah. So he is Abu Sa'id Hasan ibn Ahmad Istakhri. He was a leading Shafi scholar and he was the faqih of Iraq. He passed away in the year 328 Hijri. In his commentary, Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah also attributed this view to Ulama Istakhri. He said, أقال الاستخري أقل عدد الجمع الذي يفيد خبره العلم 10 لأن ما دونها آحاد. Sheikh Mahmud Tahan, he also chose this view of 10. In his Taysir Mustalah al-Ḥadīth, Sheikh Tahan said, Al-Mukhtar annahu 10 ashkhas. The preferred view is that it is 10 people. So commentators cite 2 reasons for this view. The first is that this is the minimum for Jam'ul Kathra, and hence it will also be the minimum for Mutawatir. In response to this, Ulama Munawi rahmallah said, لكن رد بأنه لا ارتباط عادة بين خروج العدد عن جمع القلة وبين إفادة العلم الذي هو المشترط. That this view is refuted because there is generally no connection between taking out a number from Jam'ul Qillah and between the benefit of knowledge that is essential for Mutawatir. There is no link between Jam'ul Kathra and Mutawatir. The second reason is due to the verse 196 of Surah Baqarah, تِلْكَ عَشَرَةٌ كَامِلَةٌ, that is 10 in all. This again has nothing to do with Mutawatir. وَقِيلَ فِي الْإِثْنَيْ عَشَرَةِ, and it is said with 12. So it is claimed that those who assign to this view base their opinion on verse number 12 of Surah Ma'idah, وَبَعَثْنَا مِنْهُمُ اثْنَيْ عَشَرَ نَقِيبًا, we appointed 12 chiefs from amongst them. Since 12 was the amount of people that was stipulated to spy and then convey, they argue that this shows that 12 people can convey information accurately. وقيل في الأربعين, and it is said with 40. So it is said that those who held this view present as evidence verse number 64 of Surah Al-Anfal. يا أيها النبي حسبك الله ومن اتبعك من المؤمنين. O Prophet, Allah is sufficient for you and the believers who followed you. So at this time when this verse was revealed, there were 40 people. Imam Tabarani rahmallah narrates what is chained to Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, that he said, أسلم مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 39 رجلا وامرأة وأسلم عمر تمام الأربعين, that there were 39 individuals who accepted Islam with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, composing of males and females. Umar radiallahu anh then accepted Islam, and the total then became 40. فأنزل الله عز وجل يا أيها النبي حسبك الله ومن اتبعك من المؤمنين. It was then that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse. Furthermore, the Shafi'is, they require 40 people for Jumu'ah to be valid. So they use this as their evidence. وقيل في السبعين, and it is said with 70. So the basis of this view is verse number 155 of Surah Al-A'raf. وَاخْتَارَ مُوسَى قَوْمَهُ 70 رَجُلًا لِمِيقَاتِنَا. And Musa alayhi salam selected 70 men from his people for our appointment. So 70 people were taken to implore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness and to listen to what commandments Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordained, so that they could return back to their nation and inform them. Thus, this proves that 70 is an adequate number for conveying knowledge. وَقِيلْ غَيْرُ ذَلِكَ, and it is said other than that, the claims on the various amounts are not specified with just the examples that Ibn Hajar rahmallah presented. Rather, there are many other views as well. For example, some say that the minimum is 313 because that was the number of the participants of Badr. In Irshad al-Fuhul, the number 1,400 is stated because of Bay'atul Ridwan. So in short, these scholars all held the view that the minute you have that minimum amount of people telling you something, you will definitely get conviction. That those who specified it with 4, they said that this is the minimum amount. The minute 4 people tell you something, you can now become convinced. Those who specified it with 5 said no, only when 5 people tell you something, then you can become convinced. Those who specified it with 7, they mentioned that no, you have to have a minimum of 7 people who will tell you something, then you can get absolute knowledge. So these are the minimum amounts that these scholars suggested. Mullah al-Qari rahmallah said, وَالْحَاسِلُ أَنَّهُ لَا يَجِبُ أَن يُفِيدَ ذَلِكَ الْعَدَدْ فِي كُلِّ مَوْضِعٍ وَكَذَا لَا يَجِبُ أَن يُفِيدَ أَقَلْ مِنْهُ فِي غَيْرِ ذَلِكَ الْمَوْضِعِ. That 7 is the minimum. That means in the other links you could have more than 7. But the only thing is that you should not have less than that amount. So if the narrators are more, then all the more reason you will become extremely convinced. Allama al-Qani rahmallah said, وَالْحَقُّ أَنَّهَا الَّتِي إِذَا نَزَلَ الْعَدَدُ عَنْهَا جوزت العادة وقوع الكذب على المشهور فلا يريد نقصان الأزيد عنها إليها. وفي هذا إشارة إلى أن الأعداد المعينة لعدد المتواتر عند القائلين بها ليست بيانا إلا لأقل عدد يحصل به العلم عند ذلك القائل. That all these scholars who are suggesting these numbers, they are merely suggesting the minimum amount. وأما أكثره فلا حد له. They don't have a problem with more. So those who specified 4, if 10 people have to tell them something, then most definitely they would regard that a person could get firm conviction and absolute knowledge from the statement of those 10 people. كما أشارنا إليه فيما مر. However, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying that it does not necessarily mean that if 4 or 5 or even 20 or 40 people inform a person of something, then he will be fully convinced. In this view of Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioned by very early scholars as well. Alama Jassas al-Razi rahmallah, he quotes Abu Hudayl. He said, وقال أبو الهذيل لا يعرف بخبر الأربعة فمن دونهم شيء ومن فوق الأربعة إلى 20 فقد يجوز أن يعلم بخبرهم ويجوز أن لا يعلم إذ لم يدل الدليل على وجوب بالعلم بخبرهم وعلى نفيه. So the objective is that a person must become fully convinced irrespective of how many narrators there are. Mullah Abdul Hayy Laknawi rahimahullah, he explains this by saying إنما العبرة بحصول العلم القطعي فإن رواه جم غفير ولم يحصل القطع به لا يكون متواترا وإن رواه جمع قليل وحصل العلم الضروري يكون متواترا البتة. So it all depends on what it will take for a person to become convinced. At times, a person will be convinced with just a few number of people, and at times it will take a lot of people to convince him. Many times, a person will be convinced looking at the integrity of the narrators. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned, فالسبعة العدول ظاهرا وباطلا مثل 10 عدول في الظاهر فقط مثلا فإن الصفات تقوم مقام الذوات. So he's saying sometimes maybe you will have 7 honest people and they will tell you something, then they will equal to 10 people who are not so honest. Nayai, he says مثل 10 عدول في الظاهر فقط. So he's saying that the person, those who apparently seem to be truthful and trustworthy. In passing, since Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah qualified the statement with speaking about the honesty and trustworthiness of a narrator, Allama Qasim rahmallah raised an objection against Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah. Because why is Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned مثل 10 عدول في الظاهر فقط? Allama Qasim rahmallah states that even when it comes to tawatur, one does not need to look at the integrity of the narrators. So he says, ليس بشيء إذ لا دخل لصفات المخبرين في باب التواتر. That this clause here has no merit because there is no reason to look at the integrity of a person when it comes to tawatur. Thus, if we have many liars or many sinners who narrate a report, the narration will still be accepted as long as it fulfills the conditions of tawatur. Even though they are liars, they could still be speaking the truth. You know, قد يصدق الكذوب. Sometimes a liar can speak the truth. So, and this is because you have so many people from different parts of the world. So how could they all secretly plan a lie? So even though these people are liars, it will be hard to believe that they are all speaking a lie on this particular issue, and therefore there has to be some truth in what they are saying. Even though they might lie on other issues, we can be assured that they are not speaking a lie on this particular issue because the statement is corroborated by the statement of others. In fact, even if we were to assume that a tawatur narration was transmitted by disbelievers, then too the narration would have to be accepted. Mullah Liqari rahmallah, he said in his commentary of Mishkatul Masabih, لأنه المتواتر ومثله لا يطلب بسند بخصوصه كالمتواتر لا يبالى فيه بكفر الناقلين فضلا عن فسقهم أو ضعفهم. Hence, Allama Qasim rahmallah said that ليس بشيء إذ لا دخل لصفات المخبرين في باب التواتر والمقام مستغن عن هذا كله. There is no reason for Ibn Hajar rahmallah to stipulate all these clauses. Nevertheless, the point that Ibn Hajar rahmallah is making is that a person will trust fewer people who have the reputation because of their truthfulness and he will have reservations even if a larger amount of people have to tell him something if they are liars. A smaller amount of truthful people is equal to a greater amount of liars. So one person becomes equal to many because of his qualities. An example of this is the description that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Ibrahim alayhi salam. In verse number 120 of Surah an-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inna Ibrahim kana ummah. That verily Ibrahim alayhi salam was equal to a nation. He had the qualities of an entire nation. So this is what Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying when he was explaining this lessons. He said, فَإِنَّ الصَّفَاءَ تَقُومُ مَقَامَ الذَّوَاتِ بل قد يفيد قوله سبع صلحاء العلم ولا يفيد قول عشر دونهم في الصلاح فالمراد حينئذ المماثلة في إفادة العلم لا في العدد. Mullah al-Qari rahmallah explained this in the following manner. He said, وَكَذَا إِذَا نَقَلَ عِشْرُونَ مِنَ الْمُفْتِينَ وَالْمُدَرِّسِينَ مَسْأَلَةً يحصل العلم بهم ما لا يحصل بما ينقل 20 من الطلبة أو 50 من غيرهم. Say a person needs to ask a question and he has just 20 muftis who are giving him one answer, or 20 teachers, 20 academics who are telling him something. Then he will become convinced. But if 20 students or even if 50 students have to say, or even 50 laymen have to tell him the same thing, then he will not be convinced. فالمدار الأصلي في باب التواتر على الإحالة والإفادة دون اعتبار العدد والعدالة. Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah now mentions, and he says, وَتَمَسَّكَ كُلُّ قَائِلٍ بِدَلِيلٍ جَاءَ فِيهِ ذِكْرُ ذَلِكَ الْعَدَدِ فَأَفَادَ الْعِلْمِ. That every advocate, every person who presented a number, they brought some evidence to prove that this number will give you knowledge. But it is clear how irrelevant all these numbers are, because the verses that are relied upon or the proofs which have been quoted are all out of context. And furthermore, there is a huge discrepancy between the first amount and the last amount. Where is 4 and where is 1,400? In fact, there are views that mention even more than 1,400. For example, in Al-Mudhab fi Usul al-Madhab it is mentioned وَزَادَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ بِكَثِيرٍ حَتَّى وَصَلَ الْقَوْلُ عِنْدَهُ إِلَى جَمِيعِ الْأُمَّةِ وَمِمَّنْ قَالَ بِهَذَا ضِرَارُ بْنُ عَمْرٍ. That some of them have increased the amount exceedingly high until you have those scholars who even said that no, a thing will only be considered if there's ijma', if the entire ummah have to agree on it. Like this was the view of Dirar ibn Amrin. But scholars objected to these amounts. Allama Jassas Razi rahmallah said, فَهَذِهِ الْأَقَاوِيلِ بَعْضُهَا خَارِجٌ عَنْ أَقَاوِيلِ أَهْلِ الْمِلَّةِ وَبَعْضُهَا شُذُوذٌ عَنْ كَافَّةِ الْأُمَّةِ. That some of these statements are foreign to the statements of the people of this ummah, and some are inconsistent to the opinion of the entire ummah. Likewise, Allama Amidi rahmallah said, وما قيل من الأقاويل في ضبط عدد التواتر فهي مع اختلافها وتعارضها وعدم مناسبتها وملائمتها للمطلوب مضطربة، فإنه ما من عدد يفرض حصول العلم به لقوم إلا وقد يمكن فرض خبرهم بعينه غير مفيد للعلم بالنظر إلى آخرين، بل ولو أخبروا بأعيانهم بواقعة أخرى لم يحصل بها العلم لمن حصله العلم بخبرهم الأول، ولو كان ذلك العدد هو الضابط لحصول العلم لما اختلف، وإنما وقع الاختلاف بسبب الاختلاف في القرائن المقترنة بالخبر وقوة سماع المستمع وفهمه وإدراكه للقرائن. He's saying that those who stipulated 4, the verses and the evidences of those who stipulated 5 or 7 or 10 will be against him. And then after he says that maybe even that person himself who stipulated 4, there will be occasions, and this is what Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions at the end, لِاحْتِمَالِ الْاخْتِصَاص, we'll explain it in more detail there, that it will be possible that that person himself in other situations, he will not accept 5 people. Likewise in Fatawa Hindiya, or rather Fatawa al-Fiqhiyya al-Kubra, it is written, وَلَيْسَ لَهُ عَدَدٌ مُعَيَّنٌ ومن عين له عددا كعشرة أو 12 أو 20 أو 40 أو 70 أو 300 أو 14 فقد تحكم. إن المذهب في أصول المذهب شيخ ولي الدين فرفور says والجمهور على أن كل هذه الأقاويل تحكمات واستدلالات فاسدة لا ينتهض لها دليل معتبر. So all of these don't have any basis. However, the question arises as to who exactly stated these different numbers. We mentioned the names of Alama Baqillani rahmallah for 5 and Alama Istakhari rahmallah for 10, but who suggested the other numbers? Furthermore, did these scholars actually present the proofs and verses that we quoted, or is it just an assumption that all these could be their proofs? Ulama Qasim rahmallah said, وَلَمْ تَرِدِ الْأَرْبَعَةِ وَالْخَمْسَةِ وَالسَّبْعَةِ وَالْأَشْعَرَةِ وَالْأَرْبَعُونَ فِي دَلِيلٍ أَفَادَ الْعِلْمُ أَصْلًا. In addition to that, we need to see what is the context, because it is common knowledge that there is never a hadith which has been narrated from 313 Sahaba to 313 Tabi'in. So there is no hadith which has exactly 313 in one link, leave alone 1,400 narrators. Even a link consisting of 70 narrators is difficult to find. So remember, all these are the opinions of senior muhaddithin and usuliyin. So these are scholars who were well versed with the science and the discipline. They are not just random people. They would not make futile statements. Nevertheless, as there is no specific number for a narration to be deemed mutawatir, the result is that there will be differences of opinion considering whether a particular narration is mutawatir or not. It will be relative. قال الجزري قد يكون تواتر نسبيا فيتواتر عند قوم دون آخرين كما يصح الخبر عند جماعة دون آخرين. That mutawatir will be something which is relative. Some will feel that a particular narration is mutawatir, whereas others will feel that it is not mutawatir. This is mentioned by Mullah al-Qari rahmallah, and is also mentioned in al-Yawaqit wad-Durar. وليس بلازم أن يضطرد في غيره لاحتمال الاختصاص. It is not necessary that these numbers will also come in the other will also give you firm conviction in other situations. لاحتمال الاختصاص, because it is very possible that it was only in that particular situation that a person could get firm knowledge. For example, the judge will only get firm conviction in that specific case when 4 people come and give testimony. Maybe in other cases the judge himself will not get conviction. So this means that if a person was convinced by 5 people in one instance, it does not necessarily mean that the person will be convinced by 5 people in another instance. In the Maktabatul Rushd print of Yawaqit wad-Durar, it is mentioned إذ لا يلزم من إفادة عدد معين للعلم في صورة معينة إفادته له في جميع الصور لاختلاف الحال في ذلك باختلاف الوقائع والمخبرين والسامعين. That if a person becomes convinced in one particular case, it does not necessarily mean that in another scenario he will also be convinced with that amount of narrators or with those amount of people. Allama Amidi rahmallah said that even if it is the same incident with the same amount of narrators, one may be convinced, but in another incident he will not be convinced. So to understand this here, take the following example. Say if 20 friends come and they tell a person some bad news, but they're laughing and they're joking, then this person is not going to believe them. Why? Because he can see that they are laughing and they are joking, but there are 20 people. Now in another situation, you can get 5 people who will come and they will have shock, they will have fear, and now they give news. In this case, the person will become convinced, but there are only 5 people. So you can see in one instance 20 people were not enough, but in another instance 5 people were enough. And this is what Ad-Din al-Iji meant when he said in his commentary of Mawaqif that من اعتبر في التواتر عددا معينا فقد أحال فإن ذلك مما يختلف بحسب الوقائع والضابط مبلغ يقع منه اليقين فما يقع اليقين فقد تم العدد. This is the conclusion, that it all depends on how many people on every individual case it will take to convince a person, and hence the number is not specified. We'll continue from here inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu.